Hi and welcome to another episode. What we've got here is the C64 Mini, which is basically a shrunk down Commodore 64, but they're not allowed to say that because of legal reasons. Plugs into your TV via HDMI, no AC adapter, so you need to find your own. Mentions on the side things, which is basically no AC adapter, but you need at least a 5-volt 1 amp and a TV, of course. It does 720p out, save game functions. You can use the two USB ports as either a keyboard or an extra for 2-player. No mention of the fact that you can actually load more games from a USB stick, but also it does mention though that you can update the software. The manuals in different languages, the menus in different languages, and the games are in English. Now, I just want to point out, well, I did record this already, but I'm messed up and I need to record it again at the end, the next day if anything. So please forgive all of that. But let's flip it over and figure out what the games are and what's inside. So onto the games. We've got Paranoid, Temple of Apshai Trilogy, Boulder Dash, Pit Stop 2, Winter Games, California Games, Speedball 2, Iridium, Impossible Mission 2, Street Sports Baseball, Basic, Jumpman, and Summer Games 2. So classic retro games included. Since when was Basic a game? Should be listed separately, but anyway, yeah, a load of games it mentions here. Mild violence, oh dear. Right, let's get on with opening up the main box. So we open it up, and what do we have? We have the C64 Mini, based on the original Commodore 64 bread bin. And it's Competition Pro style looking joystick, so there's a little bit of plastic there. Let's open it up. A little bit of weight to it to say it's a small one. Straight away we look at it's got power and HDMI. We've got a couple of USB 2 ports, power switch, nothing on the other side. For what I understand, it is possible to add more games to it, especially after a firmware update. Oh, more cardboard. Oh, what have we got? We've got a power cable, joystick itself, and a HDMI cable, which I'll just leave in there because I don't really need it. Quite frankly, I don't think I need the power cable either. Come on. What do we have here? The world's first retro game subscription service, Retro Reborn, at antstream.com. Use promo code 64 Mini when you sign up. Yeah, but what do you get for your promo? And it'd be nice to know what you actually got. And yeah, I'm being a bit heavy-handed with this and knocking it because of things. Those that will know. I'm not going to go into details here. The names in the list. Right, so it's in English, French, Spanish, and we have a whopping 14 pages of info. Basically, the last one telling you what the warranty is. You get 12 months. Telling you in the 3 different languages. Playing games, it tells you what the buttons do. So there's really not a lot to it in the realms of getting it out of the box. Let's put that back in there. Let's put the power supply back, power cable back in. It is a micro USB. Let's put that there. Oh, cardboard like mad. So a lot more cardboard just for presentation style more than anything actual being much else. really think that bit of plastic was needed. A couple of flaps over the top with the cardboard would have held it down. Stop it from bumping into the top of the lid. But anyway. Right. All plugged in, all turned on. Let's move the music up just a little bit. Well, that could get annoying quickly. Yeah, I'm not a fan of music constantly playing on menu systems personally, so I'm just going to turn this back down again. Right, so the manual is in 3 languages, but you can play around with 5 different languages in the menu system. Okay. Right, so right away I've plugged it into the first joystick port here. I can move the joystick around so it's seeing that. Press fire buttons, does nothing. So pressing that button made the select. And yet pressing the fire button on the game made it start. I mean, this is the firmware that came out straight away with it. How do we get out of this? So we press that button again. How weird that they had it set up like that. Bit weird as well, quite frankly. I think it doesn't sit directly on the basic from get-go, but that's me. So we've got all these different games. We'll just slide through pretty quickly. You can always press pause if you want to have a look at which games are which. Oh, that was a bit too quick, that one. Fireload, personally one of my favourite games on the Spectrum, because I grew up on the Spectrum, not the Commodore 64. And don't think I'm knocking the Commodore 64 just because I grew up on a Spectrum. No, I am not knocking the Commodore 64. I'm being very critical about this little Mini. Now, I can see the interest if you're not wanting to get hold of a full-size Commodore 64 and everything like that. I can understand that this may have an interest to you, but there's certain things that they should have made life even easier, like at the very beginning selecting your language with the fire button. Maybe they get fixed that in a later firmware, but the one out of the box should have been like that. So you can see who backed this when it was a Kickstarter. As in like a simple thing there, you know, please regularly visit www.THEC64.com. Why not move that down a bit and make sure that fits all in one go? Make it easier to read. Some thought should have been put into this. And as I say, you might think I'm being very critical. I am, of this device, not the Commodore 64, because for those that do actually follow the channel, you'll know that I have a Commodore 64 in the realms of an Ultimate 64 Elite, in a full-size C64C case and keyboard and everything. So I do enjoy that, and I've got a Commodore 128 with things to make it load from SD card and everything. So can't say I'm not a Commodore fan, even though I grew up on the Sinclair stuff. So anyway, we've come all the way across. Let's have a look at a simpler version of a game. Well, maybe not this one itself, but in the realms of it, maybe a bit easier for me to actually play. Well, it seems to display very nicely through HDMI. I give it that. The joystick feels like a cheap joystick. It's not micro switched. It's just, or if it is, it's very, well, soft. There's no click, so I doubt it's micro switched. So they've cheaped out there. I said this was an easy game. They've cheaped out there a little bit. The buttons, I'm assuming you get used to the idea of that they all do something. This one does actually have a logo for like the 3 lines, the burger, to show that you go to the menu. So that's fair enough. It does have that there. On the bottom, it has just a little rubber feet instead of suckers, which personally I prefer, because as a kid, rubber suckers always just like hurt your hands when you were a kid, and even as an adult when you hold on to them. Now they're not comfy. I'd prefer that little rubber feet would have been a better thing, because the truth is very few people actually stuck the joystick to the table and stayed there, because of the limited amount of space. And if it was a cheap, well, what we would mock now of being the IKEA type tables, but back then, it was some cheapo thing from Argos, it would wobble the whole table and you get shouted at for the table wobbling around, or making the dining room table wobble too much, so you had to hold it. So I don't know how you start a new level there, or you press a button there. Alright. Maybe I should have read the manual on which buttons was which. That's my fault. But yeah, the fire buttons are spongy as well. There is like little bits of plastic to peel off. I'm not going to do that because I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be keeping this. I was interested of having a look at it because it's the Mini, and I do have the Mini consoles of quite a few things, of the NES, the Atari 2600, SNES, Mega Drive / Genesis, or the Power of Tower thing. What else have I got? The PC Engine and the PlayStation. So they're the little minis that I've got. So I was interested of what it would look like next to them, and quite frankly, I'm not too sure. If you've come here for a positive idea of what this is, yeah, if you want to get going, it'll get you going. You can mess around and get new firmware on, and then add your own ROMs as well, but you don't get the nice little menu system. By default, I'm going to check to see if there's some kind of mod, and let's see if we can do something that way. So we've got power buttons. You have to remember the manual to remember what the buttons do, but the last one does have the 3 little lines, the burger, to show that that's the menu one. The buttons themselves though feel very spongy. Let's have a look at the menu system of it at the moment. Let's move across. By pressing the right fire button, I ended up coming to this. So I'm just highlighting system information, and it shows you, well, basically I'm assuming this is the first firmware version that it shipped with. I don't think they've made any since. Let's move back. But yeah, the joystick doesn't feel great. The joystick bit itself actually twists like 10 degrees. Why it twists, I don't know. It feels cheap and tacky, quite frankly. I wouldn't give this a good rating at all. As I said, there doesn't seem to be any micro switches. It feels very spongy in the way that it moves. All the fire buttons, the proper fire buttons, are spongy. The other ones are just little tactile things. I don't know what I've done there. Oh, started a game. Yeah, I mean, the way that the picture is in HDMI, granted you've not got your scan lines for the scan line Oh, that wasn't very good, was it? For the people that like scan lines, you don't get that effect, at least by default. Okay, maybe we should play a different game. I'm obviously rubbish at that one. I haven't played that one before. I'm probably rubbish at all the games, quite frankly. Let's go to Boulder Dash. Bit of a more simpler game. Yeah, I'm just not impressed in the realm of the joystick. At least the base doesn't have those annoying suckers, which no one really used, I don't think. Stick to the table. I know many kids got shouted at by their parents for breaking their cheap table. Oh, well, in the realms of what would have been a cheap Argos table back in the day, because there was no IKEA for here in the UK, at least not up here. And then, or the dining room table making all that shudder around. So they were forced to hold the joystick, which meant that the rubber suckers didn't feel so great in your hand. So a lot of kids actually just ripped them out. At least that's what I knew growing up. In the realms of gameplay, yeah, it's a Commodore 64. I can understand why people want to buy it, as I say, in the realms of a bit of a kick in nostalgia. Even if you don't bother updating the firmware, you don't check out the different mods. It's something maybe we'll have a look at, in the realms of installing, but not for this particular episode. I have had a look. There's two versions. So one of the mod things is called the C64 Maxi Game Tool. It does supposedly work on the Mini as well, but it mentions that it might not work on the newer versions. It seems to have been that there's been some kind of problem. They haven't bothered to update anything since, and it's been over a year since that. So maybe there's revisions 2 of these. I don't know. I haven't looked into it that far, and I'm not taking this to bits just in case I do send it back. The other one, getting the names of that, is PCUAE, and they're up to version 1.9.2 B7 at the moment, and that supposedly fixed things. I mean, that came out on the 5th of March, so it's only a few months old. And that supposedly fixes things for the minis in the realms of if it's NTSC or PAL. What else can I say about it with those things? It seems that this PCUAE is the better version to use across the board, and it means with that you end up with basically batches of carousels that you can jump backwards and forwards through, so you can't have a long list. You end up with sort of like a batch of favourites. And then that gives you a new carousel and you go in there. So I'm assuming you can, I don't know how many you can have in there, but I'm assuming you could have lists of like all your games that start with A, or at least most of them, and then A2, A3 and so on, so you get all those, and then so on and so forth. If you really want to stick every single game on, I wouldn't recommend that with this. You're better off just sticking on the games that you personally love playing. And as always, I'm going to tell you where to get your Commodore ROMs from. Commodore 64 ROMs from. The one little thing I will add in while we're doing that, we'll bring it back to the picture. Yes, I know, this is the Mini, tiny little keys. They do not come from the factory as working keys, even though it does sort of look like it, but let's be honest. A man's hand pissing around on here, or, you know, a sizable hand. And my hand span is over 20 centimeters. But there is mods you can get of where you actually mess around and stick in a working keyboard and you go click click click. I think it's very clever that they've done that, but it's not something I'll be chasing. In the realms of reviews, this is probably the most like review I've ever done, isn't it? Yeah, I think for me personally, this is going back. I have it. It is kind of nice. It's small. It, you know, it does that, but for the sake of £30 just to have a lump of plastic sat there doing nothing. I'm not one for ornaments, really. Granted, I've got shelves with different computers all on, acting as ornaments at times. But to be definitely spending £30 on this as an ornament, I don't think so. Because I've got the Commodore 64 in the realms of the Ultimate 64 Elite, which is far more functional, gives me HDMI. Granted, an awful lot more money, but that's my personal choice. In the realms of this, yes, if you want to get your little buzz of Commodore 64 games, play around with a carousel, play the games that you loved as a kid, get yourself a decent USB joystick that works along with it, it's probably worth your £30+ to have a go at it. So I did start saying a load of stuff, but as you can see, I've put it back in the box. Yeah, for me, the joystick is horrible. I played with it for half an hour. I can't stand on how rubbish that joystick feels. Granted, I can get other ones. I'm going to get adapters, have a decent joystick plugged in, but you shouldn't have to, especially since this came out costing over £100 in the first place. It's now dropped to 30. I can only think that that's what people are doing, waiting for the Amiga version of this, which I might get when it drops to £40–30. But this, now, joystick, horrible. Keyboard, well, obviously, it's a non-working keyboard, so that's not a matter of problem. The not coming with the power supply unit, I can understand why they haven't done that, because there was a push for the European Union even this past couple of years. I know this came out in 2018, that wasn't really mentioned in the realms of law back then, but it was being pushed forward as an idea in the realms of why waste, why create e-waste. The thing is though, they do that, and then inside the box, as you saw at the very beginning, there's all this extra plastic that's not needed. So either go for not creating a load of waste or don't. The cardboard was enough to stop it from rattling around and damaging itself. Same with the joystick, a strip of cardboard would have held that in place. So if you're going to go all super green about it, which is a good thing, do it properly. Don't pretend at it. The other side of it is, for me personally, £30 worth of plastic sat on the shelf, not ever going to be used. In the realms of how difficult it is to actually load games, even playing around with the modern mods for it, which is very clever what people have done, but having it that you have to have different carousels that you have to select, whereas I can just stick on a load of games on an SD card and play them fine on my Ultimate 64 Elite. Granted, huge difference in price, especially when you take into account this is £30 now. But back when it was 100 and something, you could pick up a second-hand Commodore 64 for about £40 at the time. It cost over £100 to get the board and to swap them out, and you've got an awful lot better things. So slightly more expensive, but a lot better deal in the long run. Now this has dropped down to £30 of being more of a toy. Yes, as a toy, I can see the point in it. Here you go, kid. This is the sort of games I used to play around with. Fair enough at that, but £100 plus price bracket, I would say this wasn't a very good thing to be purchasing at that kind of money. But as I say, for me personally, it's just not worth it. So it's back in its box and off it goes. So don't forget to click down below for the Discord links and for the Patreon links. Maybe even throw a bit of cash this way. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that like button. But as always, happy gaming.